Are you turned off by Bible thumpers? Do you have a particular negative connotation and perception of churches that call themselves Bible believing or Bible preaching? Has your experience been that literalist Bible readers give Christianity a bad rap? Well, you've come to the right place. This is Unfolding Wings, the greatest podcast on the face of the earth, because it's hosted by me, the Holy Pastor, the specially called one by God to explain what the Bible really means, to help young adults explore questions and issues of life, and unfold our wings. I'm joined today only by one cool cat from Charleston City, UMC, because the other one I will never forgive. But say hello.
Oh, hi everybody. It's
All right.
Diego.
Great to have you with us, Diego. And quick disclaimer, of course, I am a real person, but Holy Pastor is a fake guy. And this podcast is only intended to help young adults navigate life and not necessarily express my views or the views of the church. Now, if you have particular questions about the Bible or questions about specific passages in the Bible that confuse you or that you'd like for us to talk about in the future, let us know. I honestly don't know how you can let us know. I'm a pastor, and therefore I'm about 500 years behind on technology. It's a miracle I'm even able to broadcast this podcast. But somehow or another, let us know. And while you're at it, tell your friends about the podcast. We know that many young adults need this podcast because as we try to understand God, live faithfully, and just live life, the message we sometimes get from churches and our elders seems hypocritical, unloving, unjust, and not exactly Christ like. Or at least that's how we feel. So who do we call? After Ghostbusters, it's us. And the Bible is perhaps the number one point of contention. From what I hear, you young adults want to do away with the Bible. It's no difference, it's no more important than, say, the Harry Potter books or an Martin Luther King Jr. sermon. So we're going to clear up matters and I will set you straight because, boy, if that's what you think, that we can do away with the Bible, I might have to use the H word. You know what the H word is, right, Diego? If you don't, you're even more of an H word. And our listeners should be audibly gasping right now, like, not the H word. The FCC is probably scrambling to get us off the air before I say it, I'm sure. So let's see how much of an H word you are, Diego. Can you tell me what it is? Pop quiz?
Uh, Everything I'm thinking right now, I probably shouldn't say it on
Like an
on
actual
radio.
word we would get kicked off the
Yeah,
air for?
yeah, I do not want to get in trouble, especially if this is being recorded. But could you let me know what you mean by the H
Heretic.
word?
Ah!
Yeah. Oh my God, that's terrible.
All right. Well, let's try to not be heretics, but also work through how we understand the Bible. So let's start with what you actually think about the Bible. Let's not let me put words in your mouth. What
Mhm.
is the Bible's place in your life, and how do you think other young adults should think of it?
Mm. So for me, the Bible in my life is a place that I go when I need to think through a problem. Um, you know, if we think of everyday life, or when I'm faced with something that I really cannot decipher, I sometimes go back to the Bible, read it over some, or when I am, feeling like I need just like a friend and there's nobody out there else out there. So that's kind of what the Bible is to me, on my personal daily life.
So do you think of the Bible as when and when you turn to the Bible, is it
Mhm.
God speaking to you to help you figure out whatever problem it is, or is it just something that helps?
Ooh, that's a good question. I would say that, it, hmm,
Stumped you 2 minutes in.
yeah, no, like that. So because it puts into consideration what I think the Bible as a whole is, I guess. But I do think that it is um not something that's directly speaking to me. I think that right now at this moment, because I think beliefs and faith always are, for me at least, that have always changed, like over time and as I grown, as things go. But right now it's kind of like a story that has a very powerful story that has been used for good things and bad things, and some of those passages you can find kind of what other people have interpreted God's love or God's word to be, and how you can, see that and put it into your own life.
Yeah, so well, you're absolutely right that that question and your answer really to getting at not just how do you read the Bible, but what is the Bible to you? And I think there are a number. I don't think there are a number of different answers to that question. Right?
Hmm.
There's that God spoke it. Every word is literally God's voice that somebody wrote down.
Mm.
But there's another answer that it's just humans writing it, but humans who were inspired by the Holy Spirit, by God's Spirit. Another answer is kind of like what you suggested just then, is just humans, not necessarily inspired by God's Spirit, but we're trying our best to figure out who God is and what God would want us to do. Is that what you would say the Bible is?
Yeah, I think I would agree with the third one, and to put it out there and probably make some people mad at me. Also, I think that some things have been changed, to be able to reflect whatever those leaders that had the opportunity to change it, like back in the day, be able to have a little more control and a little more say on what they wanted to shape uh, Christianity to be. In some cases, no, not the whole Bible.
Yeah, well, and life has changed significantly since the Bible was written, right? I mean, we have
Hmm.
electricity and we have flying cars now, or probably very soon we'll have flying cars, right? We can't
Yes.
turn the clock back to 0 AD. So if God is supposed to speak to us through the Bible today, then it has to, at least in some cases, it has to mean something different than it did back then. Would you
Hmm.
agree?
I do. I think so. I think that there's a lot of things that are very different. The way that were written back then because of the history back then, as well as how things how things have how things have also been translated over and over again. So yeah, I believe that. I think and also there's like every different book of the Bible is written in a different style almost. So you can't read every. I think you can't read all the books the same way you read them. Like there's some books that are more poems than others, and some books that read like more of more um metaphorical than others.
Yeah. So, just so you know, my kids just came home from the ecotarium, so they might be
Woo!
heard trying to tell me all the cool things that they saw. So it'll add some spice to the episode if that happens. But
Oh, that's
um,
great. I love the Ecotarium. That was like I went to North High, and that's next to the Ecotarium, and we used to go there all the time because I
awesome.
think it was free for us, and my school didn't have money. But
Oh, that's
yeah,
well, that's great. I'm sure it would have been great even if your school did have money, but
yeah.
probably would have been better. You would have, but I've never been actually, so I am looking forward to hearing their stories at some point. So uh, that so there are a ton of questions that we could talk about, and
Hmm.
we're not going to talk about any specific Bible passages today. But again, as I said in the intro, if anybody has, or if you, Diego, have questions about specific Bible passages, we can come back to this topic later.
Hmm.
But I think this is where, and you said it, where a lot of people get angry, especially with young adults, is older people might say, look, the The Bible has to be God's spoken word, has to be the divine word of God. And you can't talk to me about how it's lost some meaning through translation, or how, well, some parts are supposed to be read metaphorically or poetically. It has to be God's word, or else the whole thing falls apart. Uh,
Hmm.
and so, how are we supposed to think of the Bible as something useful for our lives, as you do when you have a problem that you turn to it? How Why the Bible? Why turn to the Bible? Why is the Bible useful if it isn't God's divine word?
Hmm. So, to me, I think I grew up with the Bible. I had like all the kids' Bible stories. I had like an audiobook, everything in Spanish when I was in Peru. I grew up, I went to Catholic school until fifth grade. Um, and so a lot of things that I intertwined with probably how I learned um, my moral code, if you want to say, and how all my ethics are probably based some way or another through the Bible. And I'm not saying that other books don't have the same merit, any other religion doesn't have the same merit. They all, or people that are non-religious, I think that you just, this is the way that I learn my ethics and my morals. So the reason I go back to the Bible is because it kind of reminds me, centers me. There was a time I think that I kind of um, lost that moral compass. It was more like inspired by everything outside but myself, and it's hard sometimes, to stand for what you truly believe. When it comes to the Bible itself, outside me, I think it falls into like different camps, right? You have uh, the camp that only believes the way that is interpreted by um, their group. So they believe that the Bible is 100% true, but it's, apart from being 100% true, it's only being interpreted by that certain person that they trust. You have the camp where you can find all the answers, right wing, left wing, liberal, conservatives, all the answers in the Bible, and they all interpret one thing as the other. And there's the, you know, another camp where they just kind of uh use it almost like I say like a science book. You can depict it and uh grab things in there and everything is literal. I'm not sure which, and there's probably more beliefs in what the Bible is. I'm just picking the ones on top of my head. I think that there's no certain way to kind of look at it. Unfortunately, the Bible, like I said, is very powerful. You can, if for one reason or another, the person that you truly believe is the only one that can interpret it, or the version of the Bible is only interpreted this way, and you don't open your mind to other ways, it can be very dangerous. I mean, the Bible has been used for a lot of bad things, from slavery, racism, genocide. Um, so you have to be very careful with that. I think at the end of the day, it's kind of not pick and choosing, but trying to kind of feel what the end goal of that story is. Um, and also understanding history and context is very, very true. Um, and I don't know how you feel about what I'm about to say, uh, but I think that there was a time where, like, there's some beliefs, that I couldn't rectify with Christianity. Like, I couldn't feel like it was right. And I used to be like, well, that's not right. And people are like, well, look in the Bible and tell me that I'm wrong. And I will look in the Bible, and, what they were saying would say right in the Bible. So it pushes to a way to where it makes you believe like you either have to reject the whole Bible because of that one verse, or sometimes with your own beliefs, you have to reject that you're Christian. So I will tell people, "Hey, I'm not Christian," just because I wanted to avoid that, that my faith was different than them, because they'll be like, well, if you're a Christian, you believe this and this. So if you believe in the Bible, you should believe in everything. So now for me, it's not a pick and choose, but more like understanding in a way. It's less, I mean, I guess it's less, for me, it's less problematic to be like, well, that is wrong. Even if it's in the Bible, it's wrong. Yes, I guess I am picking and choosing in a way. I'm not gonna try to swing that. But in the context of it all, like, so I guess that Jesus, when he was Jewish, he was not a Christian, he was Jewish, when he was reading the books and his own religion, in a way he did that to be able to put in context what he believed, which to me ultimately is love. So a lot of those stories in the Bible is about love.
So yeah, a lot there. I think um, let's go with the. I'll pick up on uh, the danger sometimes of using the Bible and thinking that it's uh, literally um, God's word, or at least that there's only one interpretation, and uh, I know what that interpretation is, um, and and then determining our lives based on that. So there are passages in the Bible that say women should be subject to their husbands,
Mm,
that seem to suggest that slavery is okay. I mean, nobody ever says it's wrong, even though it's there, it's all around them. Um, so all of these things are in there, and people can use them sometimes as weapons, and have been used as weapons. Um, and and yet, as you said, one might be able to say, well, if the point of the Bible, if the point of Jesus's life is love, then that can be a framework from which we decide what might just be flat out wrong, even if it's in the Bible. So if the story doesn't point us in the direction of love, then maybe that wasn't God's word. Uh,
mhm.
and a lot of people probably are going to get upset with us uh, for saying that. But let's quickly change the subject. Do you think Adam and Eve were real people?
Not in the context that maybe the Bible's using
Oh, okay, you're gonna have to explain
it.
that.
So there's tons of creation stories in the world, right? And maybe that's the reason it is easier for me to be like, well, this could be just a story to understand where we come from. Peru, when I was born, has a story. Manco Capa and Mama Oyo, they come from the Lake Titicaca, but there's a whole story about it. It's kind of like the pantheons of gods. Same thing with, I think, with Adam and Eve. I think that these stories were passed down for generation to generation. Was there somebody, obviously, I don't think their name was Adam and Eve. I think that's the English translation. But was there somebody, two people that probably started? That's part of, for them, the world, because where, when that got written, the world was not probably the whole world, but it's their world. Could be their family, could be their community. Was there two people that maybe they're referring to from back in the day? It could be possible. Do I believe that it is the whole truth of how this world came to be and they were the first two human beings? No, I don't. I have to be true to myself. I don't believe that. No.
Well, and again, I think you speak for a lot of young adults. So I think a lot of people out there, and we surely have thousands of listeners by now. So there are thousands of young adults out there right now saying, "Oh man, I'm so glad there's someone else out there who's giving voice to my own beliefs." But I think you do speak for many, and and that's where I'm heading with that question is, what do we do with parts of the Bible that seem to contradict, well, other parts of the Bible, but also seem to just contradict reality, what we know from history and science and things. Um, you didn't quite answer in the way I was expecting, which is great. But even so, to add on to it, um, Scientists now think that humanity might have kind of evolved in two different or three different places, southern Africa as well as the Middle East. So,
Hmm.
was there even two original people? Um,
I mean,
Archaeology is starting to suggest no.
yeah,
Uh, and
and I mean, there's two stories in Genesis, so also
that's right.
like
Yeah, there are
if I'm
two
not
creation
wrong,
stories that aren't the
correct
same.
me.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so yeah, that whole story is contradictory. And the first one would suggest that God created the universe in 6 days,
Hmm.
and some people read the generations literally from Adam and Eve down to Jesus, down to us, telling us, right, that the earth is only 6,000 years old. Well, we know those things aren't true. So I think what you're getting at is there is a way to read the Bible as something meaningful and useful without rejecting God, but also without taking it all to be literally true and factual. I think perhaps one can summarize what we're getting at here by saying that there is a capital T truth that the Bible talks about without necessarily always being historically true lowercase t. What do you think?
Yeah, I think that I think I think that that is true.
With a capital T?
With a capital T.
Great.
Um, yeah, or with a lowercase t. I'm not sure which
Which is
one.
which?
Yeah, I think yeah, which one it is. I think that like you're right. Like I think there is a truth with a capital T that the Bible sometimes is not true with a lowercase t. What I would ask, I guess, what would you think of like I guess we as Christians, right? We sometimes argue between maybe two different camps or whatever, what the meaning of the Bible of a passage is, correct? That we all have different interpretations, but I guess we never argue about if it is correct or okay to be there, correct? Like if even something that we should even look at for the context of us, right? Is this, I feel sometimes that that's something that we should be able to do to, in a way, I think first of all, we should be able to discuss and argue about the Bible as just just in the regular church, even when we have the same views, if we believe that it's saying something different. I think that it makes you grow as a person. It probably will make Christianity grow as a thing. And I'm not saying to revise the Bible itself, because I feel like everything should be there, our flaws or the good things about it. But um, I think that could there be a way to be able to argue intelligently and educate in an educated way about different passages that maybe we shouldn't think about them or look at them, instead of trying to somehow literally, if a word says do not do this, and then you literally are like, well, what they meant back in the day, because I mean that is great, and I think in a way sometimes you can't look at history and be like, well, what they meant in the day, by saying virgin is a woman that was not belong to anybody, and blah blah blah. If, what they mean to this is this and this and that. But instead of saying that, it's being like, okay, well, I don't, it's not something that we should follow, because then if, this meant this or whatever. But just be like, this is wrong, this is bad, this is probably was not inspired by God, and I think that I don't know why we have a belief that somehow back in the day we were more connected to God than we are now. I don't know why. I don't know why. I don't remember reading the Bible that maybe, or maybe there is, that somehow, you know, the heavens, whichever you want to believe where it is, kind of went farther away. I don't know if we grew in that way, but so I don't know. I don't know what your thoughts are about that.
Well, I think the issue is that the pyramids used to work the way they were supposed to. There was, and that's why we're not as close to God anymore, because they've lost their sheen on the top. Uh, I've learned
I
all this
believe
from
that.
ancient aliens.
Fiction aliens. I think that's the most accurate history channel. The History Channel has history
Absolutely.
programs. History Channel
It's
has.
the best
Yes.
history show. Yeah. 100% accurate. Um, no, this is a great question. I think this is, I mean, all the questions we're bringing up are ones that I've heard so often from youth and young adults. Why even are there certain passages in there? And to preface my answer, I'll say that a lot of people don't know that there are actually different Bibles out there. So the Jewish Hebrew Bible has a different order to things in the Old Testament. Um, I won't get into why, but they do. Catholics and Orthodox have extra books in the Old Testament than Protestants do. Uh, and so obviously they're wrong, because we Protestants have
they
uh,
just
we have
they just like to read more, you know.
exactly. Um, yeah, and Protestants don't. We don't like to read. So um, so there's that. I mean, that's part of the question that a lot of people don't even realize, is that, oh well, when we talk about the Bible, what even are we talking about? Whose Bible? Um,
Hmm.
but man, it's a hard question. I think there are some passages that we can probably look at and say they really shouldn't be in there, because we know that they're later additions. Um, there's a specific passage from Paul's first letter to the Corinthians. I think it's in chapter 10, where he's talking about one thing, and then he suddenly says for two verses, oh, and women shouldn't speak in worship. And then he goes back to talking about the first thing. And it's as if somebody later on said, I gotta put this in somewhere. Like, these women, they're messing up our worship life. Paul didn't say anything about it, so I'll just throw it in somewhere, because it makes no sense otherwise. Um, and there are a bunch of passages like that. Um, as far as just saying, well, this is wrong, and
Hmm.
so we should just skip over it. Uh, that's much harder. However, I think we kind of do that anyway as a church on both sides. So I think really conservative people forget that in the book of Leviticus, which is all about the rules and the laws, says that we should welcome the alien, we should welcome the immigrant as one of us, as if they're a full
Mm.
citizen. Well, they skip right over that part to get to the other stuff. But then, on the other side, we often will skip over uh like the slaughtering of people, because that doesn't seem like it should be there. And we don't read these things in worship. We don't read these stories in
Mm-mm.
worship because for somebody they're just too offensive, they're too hard to deal with. And the thing is, so few people read their Bibles at home that you don't realize you're only getting about 80% of what's in the Bible on Sunday mornings. And that's only if that church reads all four of the passages of the lectionary
Hmm.
for every Sunday. You get 80%. The other 20% of the Bible is missing, because already we've decided, yeah, probably we shouldn't be reading these things.
Yeah, I feel like sometimes when it comes to Christians, like we're really bad, like singers, like artists that we just keep playing the same record over and over again and again, like just one song or two songs, because they're easy to decipher and they have a lot of context and it can go both ways, and we don't get into that nitty gritty of what it means and what it is. Because I think that a lot of people, when I talk to people, they remember very clearly the stories of the Harris kids that they learned in Sunday school, and how those stories have changed throughout time for them, and that's great. I think I have a good foundation with that. But a lot of people, haven't read those small story or those stories where you're like, oh wow, like oh wow, like this is really bad, like like
Yeah.
uh King David was terrible. No, I'm just kidding. Well, to me
He
he
was.
kind of was. He was. And then like how a lot of the Bible is about war, and the way that God is described is the only way that they knew how to describe somebody in power, which was a king. And and I think people forget that, and they keep describing God as just a king. And people are like, well, between the Old Testament and the New Testament, God had a change of heart and all of this. And I think, to me, like if you believe that everything then the Bible is truth, because God, is just the truth. Like He wouldn't make a mistake, and that's a different podcast. There's a different episode. But I think that what maybe changed more than God's just outlook of us is maybe how we interpreted things. How maybe just the Bible changed, just how we saw God change. That's not exactly God. So maybe we start, there was a change in history. We start seeing Him less as a king and more as a teacher. No, and I think it's funny because the Bible is such a thin book to be like, this is everything in the world and in the universe. And I really like people, and I really like pastors that do you say, like, like, I don't know everything about I know a lot about the Bible, I learned, but I interpret one way, interpret the other way. Because I really dislike people that believe that they understand everything in the Bible, everything God. Because, I mean, if you put God as the creator of everything, right, the creator of all life, um, and everything in the world, how do you think you can understand that? I feel so. I think the Bible is just a little glimpse, maybe, to what as humans, how we understand God. And I just came up with that right now. So maybe I'm not completely sure if that's what I'm thinking. I don't know. But yeah, so I don't know if that made sense as a sentence, but it's an interpretation of what we saw at that time. So that.
Well, yeah, I think I forget. I think it was Tolkien who said that essentially when God created the world, um, what happened is that um, he let out all of his light, and but we are like we creatures of God are like the ends of a prism. We only get one
Mhm.
color of that light that's filtered through the prism, and because that's all we can handle, and we need everybody else who has the other colors of the prism to be able
Mhm.
to put it back together, so to speak, and get to God's light. So that we need people who interpret the Bible and God differently, because it's all of it together that will help us figure out the full meaning. But it's really hard, right? I mean, we humans like to think that we're capable of knowing it all. And I mean, one of the first stories in the Bible is the Tower of Babel, right? Where we tried essentially erecting a temple to ourselves. Uh, so it's hard to do this. And I know you said earlier that it helps you grow as a person to talk with people who read the Bible differently. And I agree that's true, but man, that's hard, right? I mean, uh, it's more likely to end up in a fist fight than in spiritual growth. So, um, yeah, I mean, I agree with everything you're saying. Um, I think that in practice we find it much harder than we should. Yeah,
Yeah. No, I completely agree. I think, but with practice, things get easier
that is
sometimes,
true.
unless you
Yeah,
get punched in the face too hard, and then obviously you're not gonna want to practice anymore.
Well, and then your face will harden up, I guess, and the next
Hmm.
punch in the face won't hurt as much. So it
Well,
would be
that's why I
easier.
stopped going to piano lessons when I was little. But it's a different story.
Because you were getting
No,
punched
just
in the
kidding.
face?
I was getting slapped in the hands by nuns. No, I'm just kidding. No,
Yeah.
not all nuns are evil, but some do hit you pretty hard, especially older ones. When in that case, but I met some really nice nuns that have helped me. Just sorry. Yeah. Yeah, I completely agree with everything you say. I wish I had you with me at all times because sometimes I feel like I just spit words, and then talking with me everywhere I go would be great because a lot of people misinterpret what I say all the time. So
Oh, yeah, so I can be your personal interpreter. Here's what he means.
this is what he means.
Yeah.
This is Diego's language. Only he can understand.
Well, so let's see. There is a funny story about Jehovah's Witnesses I could tell here, but
Sure.
we're coming to the end of our time. So let me just ask if there is something about the Bible that you were really hoping we covered today and we haven't gotten to yet.
Ooh. Um, Oh, I mean, in the Bible itself, I think we can make a whole series about that because like there's so many things just about the Bible and then uh about each story of the Bible. I think next, whenever we have another time opportunity, we can talk about this history behind the Bible and everything that has gone through. Because I think we gotta understand what everything has gone through to understand the Bible. I think this was good understanding of how we think the Bible, how I think the Bible works a little bit, and how probably some people think the Bible works. And next time we have Kayla, who pretty sure that will bring a different viewpoint to everything that we're saying. Uh, yeah. Right now we're doing what every adult man does, which is have a podcast and just talk to each other. I was like, we need
Because
Kayla, so we're
yeah,
not so sad.
there are a ton of podcasts out there, aren't there? Of two men talking to each other about something they
Yes,
want to talk about.
yes,
Yeah,
yes. And they'll be like, and now let's talk about women.
yeah,
Okay. And let me tell you how women really feel about this. So we need Kayla. There's a lot of things, especially I think for half of our population in the world where the Bible is pretty much just I think that has been used to completely take away their rights. And we're seeing them right now, just recently. But I feel like we need Kayla for that type of conversation.
yeah. She is definitely uh, a bold voice, but
Hmm.
yeah, and that gets back to the Bible as weapon and how it can be dangerous sometimes if we don't realize that there are different approaches to reading it and interpreting it. And I think,
Hmm.
I mean, I think for me, that's the lesson today that, yeah, we will certainly come back to talking about the Bible in its place in our lives as we try to, navigate our lives and unfold our wings as we call it. Um, but that um, there is a middle ground, that there is a choice other than believing every single word in there and rejecting God and Christ completely. There's something else we can choose. And it starts with realizing that there are different approaches to the Bible. So if you are listening to this and you've always wondered why the Bible has to be read in one way, um, what Diego and I are trying to tell you is that's not true. And we are super people, so you have to believe us and trust us. Um, and and it doesn't mean that we are getting rid of the Bible. It doesn't mean that it's suddenly irrelevant. But it does mean that there's perhaps an underlying foundation that God intended for it that we miss if we focus on the trees, right? We miss the forest for the trees sometimes. Um,
Hmm.
I think it's clear that the Bible can still be a foundation for our lives without needing to be lectured about how to read it. Um, I'm debating, should I tell my Jehovah's Witnesses story just as an end or what?
Yes, I think you should. But I think you should definitely should because I really want to hear it. But before you do, because that should be the end, so people can go with God, I guess. I hope the story doesn't end badly, but I think if anybody's listening, like I don't know if you would completely agree with me everything I'm saying, but I think there's two books that I really like that kind of help see different stories in the Bible a little bit differently. And maybe if you're in that part where you're saying screw the Bible and throwing it against the ground, because I mean I would. I mean, there's a story about Martin Luther King Jr. throwing his Bible across the two books, and I don't agree with everything that she wrote by Rachel Held Evans. One is Inspired, and the other one's A Year of Biblical Womanhood. She has other great books too, but those two I think are the ones closer to the Bible. She was one of my favorite authors. Unfortunately, she passed away in 2019 suddenly. But yeah, so if I don't know if anybody wants to read them, I really like those books, and I go back to Inspired every time I read or hear something in church that I very disagree with. So yeah, that's my plug-in. We're not paid by Rachel Held Evans State, but just so you guys know, or publishing company, whoever publishes them. Although we should.
Uh, well, yeah, I'm so glad you made those recommendations. She is fantastic.
Yes,
We
she is.
She wrote a kids or she had started to write a kids book that her husband and a friend posthumously finished, and it's fantastic. I think it's called "What Does God Look Like?"
Oh
Um,
yes, I actually have seen the cover for it. Yeah. Sorry. Please
yeah, well,
continue.
I mean, I would suggest it to you, Diego, even though you're not a kid, because it's just a beautiful, and to anybody, because it's a beautiful book. I mean, the pictures are beautiful, but I mean, beautifully written. Um, but yeah, so for anyone who doesn't know, Rachel Held Evans used to be, she was raised as a really strict, conservative, right-wing Christian and moved towards the middle, uh, left later in life. And she does a great job of explaining why she made the move, not in all of her books, but in some of them.
Hmm.
So yeah, she's great. I will support those recommendations. So here's my Jehovah's Witnesses story, real quick. Um, I once had these two Jehovah. There's always two, of course, sent out two by two, uh, ringing my doorbell week after week, same time as always Sunday afternoon at around 1:30, which for a preacher is nap time. Right? So uh, one day I said, "All right, fine. I'm just gonna open the door. And I'm gonna talk to them because I'm tired of having them wake me up with their doorbell ringing." So I did, and they came in. And there's two women. We got into an argument about the Bible. I was really trying to just upset them, so that they would leave me alone in the future. That didn't happen because they thought, oh hey, he welcomed us into his home, so let's go more often. So they started coming twice a week. But anyway, so during this Bible argument, they just kept saying the same thing over and over again, which was, well, the Bible is God's inspired word. It says it in the Bible, First Timothy. And I said, well, okay, but what about how there are two creation stories and they don't agree with each other? And there's one prophecy that says we're going to turn swords into plowshares, and another says we're going to turn plowshares into swords. Like, it can't be both. So, which is it? And they just kept having the same answer. And eventually, one of them said to me, I can hear what you're saying, and I don't think we're going to persuade you, and I don't think you're going to persuade us. So why don't we just pray together? And I thought that was a beautiful little moment, kind of what you're getting at. Of, uh, all right, fine. We've come to a point where we don't agree, and that's okay. We can still love each other because that's ultimately what God tells us to do. And truly, Jesus is the Son of God, and God is love. So whatever we believe about the Bible and however we read it, we should stick with that. So let's end there, and we're hoping next time will be about music, but we can't promise this anymore. um, Otherwise, it might be about, I forget what it might be about. So let's just agree that we'll all come together for the next episode. And take heart, everybody. God still speaks. God wants you to unfold those wings. Say goodbye, Diego.
Bye, everybody.
All right. Until next time, keep it holy.